Okay. Hey guys, welcome to episode 5 of the Spark podcast. My name is Jack. I'm your host, and today we're going to talk about defibrillators. This podcast is going to be a bit more improvisational than usual. I haven't really gotten a lot of notes in front of me, but it's something that I feel like I should know a little bit about anyway. I have a few things to keep me going throughout the show, but it's mostly going to be me just talking shite, really. Which is the way I kind of wanted the podcast to go from the very start. So defibrillators are basically a device that delivers an electrical shock through the chest to the heart. Now, if you think about that for a second, you may go, why the fuck would we ever want to do that? It doesn't make sense. Why are we shocking ourselves with electricity? The theory behind it is that it causes depolarization of the heart muscles and reestablishes normal conduction of the heart's electrical impulse. Now, I've lost, I think, 90% of the people who are listening to that. Basically, I've said a lot of big words, and if you look up defibrillation, it's just full of these words, and you gotta, there's no simple explanation for this, but I'm gonna try. Basically, what a defibrillator does is it restarts your heart. It's a reset machine, basically. So you put two paddles onto the patient's chest and you send a shock in, and it basically stops the heart. That's what defibrillators do. That's why they're called defibrillators. Fibrillation is the pump, the movement of cardiac muscle. And a defibrillator stops the muscles from moving. This then gives your heart a moment to kind of just go back to what it was doing before, hopefully. I think the easiest way to explain this would be to explain how the heart works. Basically, your heart is made up of 4 chambers. There's the 2 atria and the 2 ventricles. Think of it as a house. The top right, say if you're looking at your own heart, looking at it, on the left is the right atrium. We say that because it's the person's right, if you know what I mean. The top right is the right atrium. This is where the blood comes in from the body. The deoxygenated blood that needs to be reoxygenated and pumped around the body again. So when the blood comes in here to the right atrium, the atria contract and they push the blood into the ventricles. The atriums are much smaller than the ventricles because they don't have to pump the blood anywhere near as far. It's basically from the top of the heart to the bottom of the heart. So the muscle around them isn't very thick or strong or whatever. So they just basically squeeze out and the blood goes to the bottom of the heart into the right ventricle. From here then, the ventricles contract and it pushes the blood up through your pulmonary artery to your lungs. From here, from your lungs, it gets oxygen from the air that you breathe in, and it comes back in to the left atrium. From here, it is pumped from the atrium to the left ventricle, and the left ventricle pumps it around the body. That's the basic function of the way the heart works. So your heart is constantly contracting atria, contracting ventricles. So it's got a 2-phase pump. Just going dun 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 dun. You can hear it if you ever put your ear up to someone's chest. That's what you'll hear. You hear the 2 clappings. Just atria closing, ventricles closing, atria closing, ventricles closing. And if you ever look at a diagram of a heart, you'll see that the left ventricle has much thicker walls than the right ventricle. That's basically because the right ventricle only pumps to the lungs, whereas the left ventricle pumps blood everywhere around your body. So it needs to be much stronger and pump a lot harder. This kind of rhythm, no, it's not kind of, it is a rhythm, it's referred to as a rhythm, is controlled by your pacemaker, which is basically your electrical clock in your heart. It sets it at a rate that is comfortable for you. I'm not going to go into the vast area that is the heart and how that works. I'm just going to give a brief overview. But basically, what your pacemaker does is it like calculates how much oxygen you have, how much energy you're using, and how much blood everything needs, and sets your heart rate accordingly. Ideally, at rest, it should be around 60, maybe 70 beats per minute. But it depends on the person and their basically their health at the time. And what a defibrillator does is they treat life-threatening conditions that impact this rhythm, we'll say. So basically it tackles things like arrhythmia, which is when the heartbeat is irregular. Either it's going too slow or too fast. It also tackles things like ventricular fibrillation. This is where the heart quivers rather than giving a steady pump. So if you ever look at an electrocardiograph, which is basically a graph of the electrical activity in the heart, you'll see that it has a nice... It's one of my favorite types of wave. I never thought I'd actually have types of wave that I prefer, but the PQRS wave is one of my favorites. It's got a big peak at the start. That's the... Is that the 8? I can't remember what it is. I really should have looked this up. But basically, it's a big peak at the start, drops down, goes back up, and then there's a little peak again. It's basically an electrical representation of the atria and ventricles contracting and pumping the blood around. And in a normal patient, you see a very clear... I say a normal patient. In a patient that has normal cardiac activity, you'll see that very clearly defined graph over and over again. It'll repeat itself, and it's just constant. It's like clockwork, unless they're up and moving around and the heart's beating a bit quicker, but it'll still hold that shape. Now, an arrhythmia will have a beat that isn't constant. It'll be really quick and then really slow and then really quick and really slow, or some variation in between. Defibrillators can be used to kind of reset this, and a ventricular fibrillation is, which I said is when the heart quivers, is just, it'll be a squiggle. It won't represent anything near that lovely PQRS wave. It'll just be a squiggle. Now, a lot of patients will be able to still move around when they've got this. Other times you'll be unconscious and it'll be very badly. The one thing that kind of made me do this podcast is defibrillators do not work on patients who are experiencing a systole. And a systole is when you flatline. So when you ever see... It happens all the time in every medical TV show that has ever graced the television. There's always someone in the middle of a surgery, or they've had some weird complicated procedure or whatever. They've just like collapsed and they're hooked up to an ECG machine, and they're showing them, it shows the electrical activity of the heart, and it's just a flat line, and the doctor will come in and say, "Get the defibrillator, we're going to bring them back from the depths of hell and bring them back to life," and all that shite. It doesn't work like that. That is what a defibrillator does to you. You're basically turning off something that's already off. It doesn't work like that at all. It's only there's a very small amount of rhythms that are shockable. There's a very small amount of rhythms in general, but you don't shock someone who's got a regular PQRS wave, and you don't shock someone who's in a systole. I just want to get that off my chest, because I see it on every show and I'm just like, bullshit. No one's done any research on this at all. So the point I want to get across is defibrillators aren't magical life-saving machines. They're just we found out that electricity has an effect on the heart, and we put it into some fucking working order. Yeah. So next time you're watching fucking Grey's Anatomy and they bring someone back who's flatlined with an electrical pulse, you can just call bullshit. Tweet at who the fuck makes Grey's Anatomy? I don't know. Is it HBO? Yeah, tweet at HBO and say you're bullshit. I don't think it's HBO. Don't tweet at HBO. Basically, defibrillators came around as a kind of idea that inventors were toying with, because at the turn of the 20th century, cardiac arrest became a leading cause of death. People were living long enough that the hearts were giving out, and we were eating. Basically, diet changed, and we started eating a lot of fucking sugar, and our hearts started giving up because people were getting fat. Inventors around the world had touched upon the idea of using electrical shocks to kind of restart or correct the heartbeat around the late 1800s. So it's something that we've known about for a while, that basically the human heart runs on electricity. We're all batteries. We all have our own electrical impulses going through our body, and that's what our heart is based off, as I said earlier with the pacemaker. The first recorded successful defibrillation ever was performed by Claude Beck in 1947. So it took like 50 years for it to actually happen in an actual recorded case. The patient who it was performed on was a 14-year-old boy who was experiencing ventricular fibrillation during his surgery. This is, as I said earlier, is when the heart is quivering rather than giving a constant PQRS beat. It was a very, very crude. It was a very, very crude thing, basically. Like, you see defibrillators now, and they're nice little shiny boxes with like lovely housings on them and instructions and all that. This was essentially two silver electrodes about the size of teaspoons, and they just put it on either side of it. Was this wasn't when the child, or I say the child, the 14-year-old boy was he didn't just collapse or anything. He was in the middle of surgery, so his chest was like wide open and they had full access to the heart. Basically, what this Claude Beck guy did was he got two silver electrodes, put it on either side of the heart, and sent a 60 hertz wave through, and it worked, and that's essentially what we based it on. It stopped his heart and brought it back, let it restart itself, and brought it back into its regular beating. So from that, we've kind of moved forward a lot. And I say a lot. The first closed chest defibrillation was successfully performed on a dog, surprisingly enough, in 1954 by William Cowenhoven. I may be mispronouncing his name, and his I don't know if it was someone who was partnered with him or if he was his assistant. So if he was partnered with him, I apologize for referring to you as an assistant, but William Milner was also involved. Now, William Cowenhoven was what he did was good, but he kind of went about it for funny reasons. I say funny reasons, it was a money thing. He originally devised the closed chest defibrillator for power companies. It was a way to resuscitate workers who had been electrocuted by working on power lines, which, is a good thing in itself, but it was basically to save money. So you just resuscitate them rather than send them to the hospital because it's cheaper, and then they can just get straight back to work. Which is great. Don't get me wrong, things that are invented for good reasons, we're still he was still saving people's lives, but he was doing it from a money standpoint, and I have no real problems with that. If you do good things for bad reasons, you're still doing good things. So yeah, more power to you, Mr. Cowenhoven. The process was improved upon by Paul Zoll, who performed the first closed chest defibrillation on a human in 1956. And then we've moved forward leaps and bounds to the modern AED, which was invented in 1978. I'm not entirely sure who invented that. From training courses I've been on, I have an inkling that it was developed by Philips. Yeah, that company that makes TVs and stuff. they got their hand in everything, but they developed what I believe, I could be wrong, but what I believe is the first modern automated external defibrillator, which also works as a regular defibrillator, which was the Heartstream XL. But I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that if you're ever in a life or death situation and someone asks you what was the first AED ever created and you say the Heartstream XL and you get shot. Don't blame me. I don't know why that would ever happen, but whatever. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. That's the first time I've ever gotten a phone call or been interrupted at all in the middle of one of these recording sessions. It was actually Phillips telling me to stop talking shit about them. But what the fuck was I talking about? Oh god, I should have listened to it. But anyway, defibrillators nowadays are very, very fucking sophisticated machines. Well, yeah. All right, we're going to talk about the basic function of a defibrillator and what it does internally. Basically, what it is it's a giant store of energy, and it just pumps it into your chest. That's it. The way it functions is there's a component inside in it called a capacitor, and what a capacitor is it's basically an electrical component that stores energy. You see them; they're on everything. They're absolutely tiny usually. You can get them where you can't even fucking see them. They're just on printed circuit boards. But the ones in defibrillators are fucking enormous. They're like a liter, like a liter of stored electrical energy, which is a fuck ton of energy. Most modern ones can go up to 200 joules, which is kind of the max, kind of the max recommended voltage you should use on someone. Not voltage, energy you should use on someone. The voltage is completely different. And the way they work basically is there's two settings on most modern defibrillators that are used in hospitals. These are the clinical use ones. You'll see them on, if you're ever in a hospital ward, hopefully you never will be, but if you're ever sick, go to the hospital. But if you're ever in the hospital and you see a crash trolley, which is usually the big red trolleys, you'll see that they have a defibrillator on them, hopefully, unless someone's nicked it. And those are the ones that are they're like big boxes. And they have your ECG leads, which are put on the patient to monitor the heart activity, and you'll have paddle attachments. Most places use the disposable ones, which aren't the ones that you see in movies where they actually had the pads in their hands and they say clear and they shock them. They're ones that are kind of sticky, so they shave if you're a man or a hairy woman, they'll shave your chest, stick the pad on, stick the pads on. One goes onto the sternum, which is in the middle of your chest, and the other one goes to, I believe, I'm not a clinical person, so I believe it's like the ribs on the left side of the body, so that goes across the heart. You want the minimum amount of space that actually goes through the heart, because these things cook you. Literally. Like, it's like where there's electricity, there's heat, and where there's heat, there's pain. So I've seen it once in real life where people will use two defibrillators and use a higher energy, and that has been proven in certain cases to work, but it's very, very bad for you. I was watching some fucking Netflix show. Well, I wasn't watching. I came in to the room when my housemates were watching some fucking medical show on Netflix. I don't know what it's called, but it's the one where the doctors were also all in Iraq at some point, so they're like hardened war vets, but now all super smart doctors, and I don't know what the fuck it's called. It's like fucking... I have no idea. But at one point, there is a woman in there who is flatlined, and you shouldn't be using the defibrillator on it at all. But the guy goes, "Get 2 defibrillators. I want to use 400 joules of energy." And they use 400 joules of energy on her for, I believe, like 2 hours, shocking every 30, 40 seconds. And she comes back to life, which, you know, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but to me that sounds like you're cooking someone alive and you're shocking them when they shouldn't be shocked anyway. Fair. If she came back to life, fine, whatever. Wouldn't have worked on an S-delay rhythm, but 400 joules of energy applied to your chest through electricity will fuck you up. You wouldn't want to come back to life. Your lungs would be fucking singed to death. You'd have no cardiac muscle left. It's nuts. Like, these things are bad for you. Don't get me wrong. If you're ever in a situation where you have to use one, fucking use it. They work. All right. The ones in the hospitals, they work in a clinical setting. They are successful 10% of the time. Which sounds bad, because everyone has the idea in their head that they're magical machines that bring people back to life. They're not. They're tools that we use to try and bring people back from ventricular fibrillation, arrhythmia, and other various cardiac problems. So the AD, that's the AD function, where it's someone who isn't trained specifically on the use of a defibrillator will basically hook this up, and the modern ones now tell you what to do, which is fantastic. So you'll open up the pad, you put one on the middle of the chest, one on the side of the chest, and some of the newer defibrillators will tell you what to do. Basically, whoever's in charge of the resuscitation department sets the rate and the amount of energy that's used. Usually it's like 150 to 200 joules is the average automated shock. Have I said what AED stands for? It stands for Automated External Defibrillator. I can't remember what the fuck I was talking about before I got that phone call. It's really fucked me up. But basically that's the automated setting. You also have the clinical setting, where you can set the rate, or set the power, energy, set the energy that's delivered, and give a shock whenever you need to. This ranges from anywhere from 1 joule to 200 joules, usually in increments of like 20 up to 100, and then it goes 150, 200. So those are the ones used in hospitals. The ones that you are ever going to use most likely are the automated external defibrillators that you'll see at restaurants, at convention centers, in fucking shopping centers, and in sports grounds. You'll see them, they're on the wall. They're usually in some sort of lockbox. They most of the time have some sort of like red or green packaging in them. And they're little devices. They're anyone could buy them. They're like, you can buy them for like €100. I don't know. Anyone can buy them, put them up wherever they want. But these things are little magic boxes, basically. These work way better than the ones in a clinical setting, because now, as I said earlier, the ones in the clinical setting have a 10% chance of working. That's mostly because they're used on patients who have a lot of things wrong with them. Mostly people who are kind of at death's door anyway. And there's nothing you can do to help. Now, the ones that are used in sports, sports grounds or fucking the ones on the wall you see in public places, they have a kind of a success rate of, depending on timing, around 90% in the first 10 minutes, and I think it drops off by like 10% every 10 minutes, or is it every 10 minutes, or yeah, it decreases by 10% for every minute that nothing is done. So in the first 10 minutes, you got like a 90% chance of resuscitating this person, on average. Sometimes people are fucked and there's nothing you can do, or just that's the way the world works, and it sucks, but that's it. Basically, these devices are the AED function on a clinical defibrillator without the ability to set the amount of energy delivered. So when you open one up, they'll have instructions on them. Ideally, they can be used by someone without training. That's kind of the idea behind them, but you're much better off to get training. So if someone's having a cardiac arrest in front of you, you'll run to this lockbox, open it up. Some of them have a really fucking stupid way of accessing it. I'll talk about that afterwards. You'll open it up. You will open the pack, turn on the AED, leave it charged for, I think it takes like 30 seconds or more to charge. My microphone is falling down. God, the podcast today is hitting a lot of bumps. My mount for my microphone is falling off the desk, and I'm just holding it now. Oh, it's not my day. Basically, you'll open up the pack. It'll give you instructions of where to put the pads, how to open them up, and I think some of them come with a little shave kit in case someone's hairy. You put that on. There's a little X on the one that goes in the sternum. That's where you put your hands for CPR. They're designed to be used in conjunction with CPR. So you'll put it on. It'll say, like, some of them literally tell you through audio cues that perform CPR for 30 seconds, and then it'll start beeping, say clear, you move away, it delivers the shock, and then you deliver CPR again until the person comes about or until paramedics get there to either take over or to assist you or whatever needs to be done. That's the ideal scenario. Some of them are in fucking stupid boxes. Like, a lot of them are locked behind keys, with keys, which makes sense to me because they're expensive and whatever. But some of them have these stupid like plastic lock boxes with codes on them, and the code changes every day and nobody knows what it is. So the instructions on the boxes are to take out your phone, call the number on the side of the box. There'll be a reference number also on the box, so you ring them, quote them the reference number, and then they'll tell you the code. In theory, that works fine if you have a phone. Most people have phones all the time. That makes sense. But what if you don't? Then you're fucked. You gotta rip the thing out of the wall if you can. I just don't agree with it. I prefer the ones that are either like lock and key and someone who is there all the time has the key, or they're just open and they alarm when you open them. They work fine for me. I'm happy with those ones. The ones that you have to ring up a company and say like, oh, I'm at such and such a place and the code is this, and tell me the number and I'll type it in and see if that works, and if it doesn't work then we're fucked, while the person behind you is fucking dying. You know, it doesn't make sense to me. As I said, these kind of AEDs are designed to be used by anyone, but you're much better off to get training. One place that I know that does training is Irish Heart. They do what is called the Heart Saver CPR AED defibrillator course. It's ideal for anyone who wants to learn CPR and how to use an AED and would like to receive a course completion card. It takes about 4.5 hours to complete the training course, and it gives you the basic techniques of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, which is CPR, and how to use an AED. It also teaches you how to relieve choking for adults, children and infants, if that's something you want to know. That's probably something you should know anyway, because fucking cardiac arrest can happen anywhere to anyone. Anyone could have a fucking heart attack. You know, you don't know what the fuck's going on in people. It's good to know. And as always, I always think it's best to know how to fucking help people who are having a shit time. Be it heart attacks or anything else really. But I should probably stop. Fucking jeez. I should probably stop talking about defibrillators, because I've gone over my half-hour mark and everything around me is falling apart. I'm literally holding on to my mic boom stand and my arms are getting tired. So I'm going to put this back up. I'm going to thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed that one, because it was something that I kind of just talked off the top of my head, and it was a lot easier to put together, but we'll see. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening, everyone. This episode was a bit of a fucking clusterfuck. I got 2 phone calls in the middle of it, and my mic started falling around the place. I woke up late this morning as well, so it's going to be a bit later. Well, obviously you're listening to it now, and it came out a bit later than it usually does. But yeah, it was something that I didn't really have to do a lot of research for, because it's something I work with every day. So I might be wrong on some things, but these are just opinion pieces. You're going to learn a little bit, and the idea is you do your own fucking research. Don't quote me. If you're interested in it, go have a look at it yourself. I don't know who the fuck's interested in defibrillators, but this is how they work. Yeah, that's the episode. I didn't even write this bit. Why didn't I write this bit? The next episode, we are going to talk about the Fermi paradox and extraterrestrial life. That's a big fucking topic. How the fuck am I going to fit that into half an hour? I don't know. I'm going to do a lot more research about that than I did about this one today. But anyway, I have a little, every time I start recording this, I don't know what I'm going to say. So I just pick, I have post-its on my desk, and I just pick up one and go, that one. So the Fermi paradox is the next one. It's very interesting. It's something that makes you think. And hopefully it'll make you think when I'm talking about it next week, and I'll be able to explain it in some sort of cohesive way that is also entertaining. I want to thank everyone for listening. If you ever want to make contact with me, I'm on Twitter at PodcastSpark. That's PodcastSpark. Make contact with me there. Tweet at me. Give out to me. Tell me I'm doing a shit job. Whatever. Just, make yourself heard like everyone else. But thanks for listening, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.